to welcome everybody to the the Pacifica Planning Commission meeting of this evening. This is the second month of the year, the 22nd day of 2022. It's kind of a fun and unusual day that we're meeting. I want to go ahead before we launch into the meeting proper. I want to share a few items of information about the way we'll be conducting this meeting tonight. And this meeting of the Pacifica Planning Commission will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of Government Code Section 54953, as amended by AB 361, which authorizes teleconference meetings under the Brown Act during certain proclaimed states of emergency. The Governor of California proclaimed a state of emergency related to COVID-19 on March 4th of 2020. This teleconference meeting is necessary so that the city can conduct necessary business, and it's permitted under Government Code Section 54953 in order to protect public health and safety of attendees. Consistent with Government Code Section 54953, this meeting will be held via teleconference only and will not be physically open to the public. Commissioners and city staff essential to the meeting will teleconference into the meeting by audio and/or video. The meeting will be conducted via Zoom. Participation via the Zoom link will enable the meeting to be observed live and will enable the public to speak during public comment periods. The Zoom link was published in the meeting agenda. Live public comments are being accepted at this meeting. Public comments may be provided live by members of the public. Utilizing the Zoom link to participate in the meeting, utilize the raise hand function in the Zoom application on a computer, smartphone, or tablet, or else enter *9 to raise your hand if you're dialing in by phone. Please ensure your name is correctly entered in your Zoom profile so city staff may properly identify you when it's your turn to speak. Those dialing in by phone will be called to speak by the last 4 digits of their phone number as shown in the Zoom interface. With those preliminary matters out of the way, I want to go ahead then and ask for a roll call, in particular to assure that we've got a quorum present. Mr. Murdoch.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Berman.
Present.
Commissioner Domerat.
Present.
Commissioner Godwin.
Present.
Commissioner Hauser.
Present.
Commissioner Niblin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioner Domerat, I was hoping you could lead us in the salute to the flag this evening.
Okay. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
The republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Domerat, and everybody else who participated in all that. We're going to move to administrative business, but before we take on the administrative business specifically, I'm going to ask if there's any public comment with respect to any of the items of administrative business, and I'll ask Mr. Murdoch to help us with that.
There are no hands raised, Chair.
Thank you. There being no public comment on the administrative business, I'll first move to approval of order of agenda. I'll ask if there is a motion to approve the order of agenda. Commissioner Berman.
I move that we approve the order of agenda.
Thank you. Commissioner Berman has moved that we approve the order of agenda. Commissioner Godwin.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the order of agenda. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Berman.
Yes.
Commissioner Domerat.
Yes.
Commissioner Godwin.
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser.
Yes.
Commissioner Niblin.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes for our meeting of January 18th, 2022. Is there any comment or discussion or even a motion regarding this matter? I think I'd like to flag seeing no hands immediately. I think there are a couple of places where they're small matters, but I wanted to just raise them. I saw on packet, sort of the agenda packet, page 5, there was a reference to designation of liaison to the City Council meeting of January 24th, 2022. About halfway down the page, there's a reference to Chair Berman confirming that we don't need a liaison to the next council meeting. I think that probably should read Chair Niblin. I think I was the person who made that comment. And then on page, agenda packet, page 8, there's a reference at the end of the first paragraph on page, it's page 5 of 31, but agenda page 8. There's a statement that says, he asked if any commissioners had any addition to ask. I think that probably should read, had anything additional to ask. And finally, in the next paragraph, there's a reference to Commissioner Hauser stating that she would appreciate putting the renders, I think it's renderings. So just a couple of typos, nothing else there. Any other comments or concerns regarding the minutes? In any event, a motion would be in order if anybody's inclined to make one. Commissioner Hauser.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with the changes that you made, Chair.
Thank you. We've got a motion to approve the minutes subject to those changes. Is there a second? Commissioner Byrne.
Second.
Great. Well, we have a motion by Commissioner Hauser, second by Commissioner Berman. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Berman,
Yes.
Commissioner Domerat,
Yes.
Commissioner Godwin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser,
Yes.
Commissioner Niblin.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And Mr. Murdoch, I'll confirm that we do not need a liaison to the city council meeting at this time.
Correct, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So that will take us into the portion of the agenda that's available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission that is not on the agenda. The time allowed for any speaker will be 3 minutes. I'm getting just a little bit of feedback. I don't know if that's something that can be avoided, if someone's got a microphone on or if it's just me.
Yeah, Chair
Anyway.
Niblin, it was, I think Commissioner Hauser's microphone I muted and it went away. Perhaps turning down the volume on that end would help.
Thank you. In any event, again, the oral communication section of the agenda is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on issues within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission that are not on the agenda. And the time allowed for any speaker will be 3 minutes. I'll ask Mr. Murdoch if we have anybody to address us under oral communications this evening.
We do, Chair. There's one hand raised currently by Cliff Lawrence. So give me a moment to get ready to bring you in, Cliff.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Please go ahead anytime you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. Honorable Commissioners, thank you. Good evening. My name is Clifford Lawrence. Our first U.S. president was born on this date 290 years ago. He commended to us to remain mindful of the importance of the role of citizen. We are all here this evening as concerned citizens and as such honored. Next, I wish to express my thanks for the recent upgrade and revisions to the draft general plan and draft EIR documents. These indices and search-friendly capabilities have opened up a window of opportunity to identify what is and what is not there. Tonight, I thought I'd share with you some things that you might not have known about our 2022 draft EIR. More specifically, some nerdy things about its bibliography. First, there are 193 references. The oldest, 1974, the newest, 2013. There are no references newer than 2013. In fact, the 2022 bibliography is identical to the one 8 years earlier. There are 5 references with no date. There is one document with reference by the year at 3013. Mind you, I accept that I may have made some errors in the creation of this profile, but then I was a little rushed compared to the years utilized by our high-paid consultants. We spent a lot of money on these consultants in the years 2021 and 2020. Somehow they managed to add 300 pages to the 2014 DEIR without a single change to the bibliography. How is that? There's another matter of concern. The word contingency. It only appears 10 times in the 1,000 pages of the DEIR, twice in reference to water, 8 times in regard to access for emergency vehicles. Should I conclude that there is no contingency for the eventual loss of infrastructure under Beach Boulevard? There's no contingency for the potential erosion of Palmetto Avenue at the South Canyon. How much longer would it take emergency vehicles to get to West Fairmont if they can't use Palmetto Avenue? In conclusion, I ask you this question. You are not only planning commissioners, you are Pacifica citizens. And as citizens, how would you grade this draft G general plan and draft EIR? Are you also concerned? What if we paid for the emperor's clothes? I thank you for your time, and I ask we all pray for peace.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Murdoch, are there any other comments under oral communication this evening?
There are no other hands raised, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. So we'll go ahead then and close oral communication and come back to the commission for new public hearings. And our one new public hearing this evening is file number 2020-014, excuse me. Sign permit S13320 and sign exception SE3122, filed by Mike Taron of Northwest Signs to establish a master sign program for on-building tenant signage and revisions to the design of an existing freestanding sign along Oceana Boulevard at the Eureka Square Shopping Center located at 2010 Eureka Square. The recommended CEQA action is a Class 11 categorical exemption pursuant to Section 15311 of the CEQA guidelines. And staff's recommended action is that we approve as conditioned. And I'll go ahead, Mr. Murdoch, and ask for a staff report.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin, can you just confirm that you see my screen? I had some trouble selecting which screen to share a moment ago. So will you let me know now if you're seeing my presentation?
I see your presentation. Thank you.
All right, terrific. Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Commissioners. I'm Deputy Director of Planning, Christian Murdoch. As the Chair mentioned, tonight we're here to consider a master sign program for the Eureka Square Shopping Center. The existing master sign program was last amended in 1995 and was originally approved in 1987. Within the last couple of years, the shopping center owner has undertaken a significant rehabilitation of the center, improving its exterior facades and architecture, and has now come in to ensure that the master sign program and the sign designs are consistent with the new building layout and architecture, which has prompted and precipitated this specific application. The shopping center is located in East Sharp Park at the intersection of Oceana Boulevard and Eureka Square Drive. It's roughly between Clarendon Road and Paloma Avenue on the east side of Highway 1. It's a slightly larger than 6-acre site. It has 2 driveways from Oceana Boulevard and multiple access points from Eureka Square Drive on the south. And as you can see here, I've highlighted some key points that may come up in the commission's deliberation. A, B, and C indicate the locations of Tower A, Tower B, and Tower C that are discussed in the staff report and the master sign program. And here the F is to indicate the freestanding sign that's also subject of the master sign program tonight. The shopping center is comprised of 2 buildings, a north building and a south building. There is a 3rd building in the vicinity, the US Bank building, but that's on a separate property and not subject of this master sign program. The north building is comprised of a ground floor with retail and professional services and personal services, and a 2nd floor primarily of professional offices, which is important with respect to some of the proposed signage in the master sign program. The south building is comprised of mostly 1-story inline retail spaces, relatively small spaces, and then the large anchor tenant, the Oceana Market. In total, the north building has approximately 340 linear feet, which is used to generate the allowable sign area for the master sign program. And the south building has approximately 663 linear feet. There are roughly 4 categories of signs. There's 3 wall sign type signs, those for small tenants with less than 10,000 square feet of floor area, anchor tenants with 10,000 square feet or more of floor area, and then tower signs, which provide more of a collective sign for certain categories of tenants. All of the signs are generated at a sign area of 0.75 square feet of sign area per linear foot of business frontage per the municipal code. One unique exception to the municipal code standard of one sign per business in a multi-tenant shopping center is this sign program proposes that corner tenants have one sign per corner frontage. And so you may expect, for example, a corner tenant to have two signs, one on each side of its lease space as a result. And the small tenant signs are proposed to have a maximum letter height of 18 inches. Anchor tenants are those at 10,000 square feet or more of floor area. They have sign area generated at the same rate, but they are allowed to have larger letter height as proposed in this master sign program, up to 36 inches in height for the main sign. And again, as an exception to the one sign per business provided in the municipal code, this master sign program would allow up to 3 signs for anchor tenants, 1 main sign at the 36-inch letter height, and up to 2 secondary signs at an 18-inch letter height. And then lastly, the tower signs, as I mentioned, there is Tower A, which is at the north building. It's proposed to have the collective signage for the tenants in the professional offices above the ground floor. Those don't have individual recognizable building facades where the signage could be located. So the property owner has proposed to combine those into signs of up to 30 square feet in size on 2 different elevations of Tower A to provide a centralized sign area for those separated and not highly visible professional offices at the second floor. And then Tower C is proposed to have signs for tenants whose business frontage is shielded behind that tower. Given the building configuration, there are several spaces, 3 in fact, that are in an interior corner. One of them is completely obstructed along its tenant facade, and 2 are partially obstructed. And so as a result, those signs are proposed to be allowed on Tower C. And then the 4th type of sign is the freestanding sign that I mentioned earlier. The current sign, from what we could tell, was approved in the 1960s. And as a result, it's time for some upgrading and modernization of the sign design, in particular to comply with the municipal code to ensure that all of the signs in the master sign program are consistent in terms of materials, design, character, et cetera, and that they also integrate and complement the building architecture for the buildings that the signs are associated with. And so as a result of the major facade upgrades at the shopping center, this freestanding sign rather is no longer consistent in terms of its architecture, design, and character, either with the other proposed signs in the shopping center or with the building architecture, materials, and design of the renovated shopping center. So as a result, they've proposed a sign that's smaller and would comply with the municipal code height limit on freestanding signs, which is 20 feet above the surrounding ground area. And that would comply with the area limitations proposed and allowed in the municipal code. And so you can see here on the left side, the proposed freestanding sign. It's a 2-sided sign, and under the municipal code, the sign area on both sides are counted towards the allowable sign area for a freestanding sign. And given the very large frontage of this particular piece of property, this freestanding sign would have a sign area much lower than what would be allowable under the municipal code. And just lastly, some additional details. There's a decorative stone base, and these tenant panels would be routed out to match the center identification panel at the top of the freestanding sign. It would have internal illumination. Staff has recommended a number of conditions of approval to make relatively minor changes to the master sign program as proposed by the applicant. Those are outlined in detail on packet pages 64 and 65. Some of those clarifications were already described in my presentation. Additionally, after discussing with the applicant after publication of the agenda packet, he's indicated that a few clarifications were required. In one instance, there's a typo in the staff report. On packet page 42, the staff report incorrectly mentions suite lease space or tenant space 160 is partially obstructed, when in fact it's 180. So just clarifying that for the record. On packet pages 42 and 43, we mentioned that potentially an anchor tenant sign could go on Tower C. The applicant has said that they have no intention of putting an anchor tenant sign on that tower, but the provisions that staff has recommended in the conditions of approval would address that situation if that intention changes in the future. And then lastly, on packet page 43, the applicant has clarified the design of the tenant panels are in fact consistent with the center identification. As I mentioned a moment ago, they are routed out panels with push-through acrylics that would have internal illumination. And so lastly, staff recommends finding this application categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. As noted in the staff report and as the chair mentioned in the introduction of the item, we recommend a class 11 exemption, which applies specifically to various types of pertinent installations such as on-premises signs. And so staff recommends that the commission find the project categorically exempt from CEQA and approves the master sign program by approving the sign permit and sign exception as noted here and in the recommended motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch, for that report. Go ahead and ask my colleagues if they have any clarifying questions or comments for staff before we hear from the applicant. Not seeing any comments or questions, I'll go ahead then and do as we typically would in a case like this. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hauser, please go ahead.
No, it's my fault. The the bottom of the screen was below the anyway, technical difficulties. I just had a couple of quick clarifications that I wanted to understand. I really appreciate it. This is a very detail-oriented staff report, and I think it's just there was one thing that was a little bit over my head. So when you say in the staff report, there was a comment, therefore, in the event of a narrow business frontage, the proposed MSP's provisions could result in signs that have sign areas inconsistent with the PMC provisions. Are any of the tenants currently contemplated as narrow or?
I don't think so. I think the math roughly works out to about a 13-foot linear frontage. It's very small, but on occasion you'll find spaces carved up. I've seen it in my career when perhaps the economy is not as good and people downsize their spaces. We just wanted to prevent against, what I would say is probably an unusual situation to ensure that in all instances, the signs would be consistent with the Pacifica Municipal Code, except where the exceptions may be granted by the commission, as noted in the staff report.
Got it. Okay. And then for the places where 3 signs are allowed for one tenant, is there a spacing requirement that, you can't have 2 of those 3 signs, right next to each other?
I'm not aware of one, and nothing comes to mind immediately. Contract planner Ranu Agarwal is also here, and she's done a lot of detailed work on this. She can chime in if she's aware of such a provision.
So if you look at the elevations, they have shown the general locations of where the signs would be. So if it's the location, it's the elevation which shows the anchor tenant. I believe it's the west elevation, and they've shown the main sign, and they've shown 2 locations for the secondary signs. In fact, 3 locations for the secondary sign, and it could be on 2 of those locations.
And that would be on packet page 78.
So I'm at, okay, but it's on the sign program. It's page 11 of the sign program on the bottom elevation.
On the west elevation. Let me just go and
South building, west elevation, retail.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so okay, I see what you're saying. All right. I think that's it for you guys. I have a couple more for the applicant, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Absent any other comments or questions of a preliminary nature, I'll go ahead then and as we would typically do, hear from the applicant. The applicant would have up to 10 minutes to present with respect to the project, and then from there we will hear from the public. The applicant is able to reserve some of the 10 minutes if the applicant chooses to respond to anything that we hear from the public. So, is the applicant here this evening, Mr. Murdoch?
Yes, Chair Niblin, Thomas Biagini and Mike Tarrin, who has phoned in.
Okay.
Chair Niblin,
I'm Mike Tarrin. I don't know.
Proceed.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm muted. I'm Mike Tarrant with Northwest Signs. I'm here for any questions that.
Mr. Tarrant, we can hear you. We can hear you fine. Mr. Biagini,
Okay.
I think we see you as well. Mr. Tarrant, was there anything specifically that you wanted to state beyond what staff has?
Well, I saw a few things in there in the monument conditions. Number one, it sounds like in the conditions it says all tenant panels will have the same font style as the center ID. I was under the impression we were going to allow the market to have their logo and their font style. That was the first thing. And the second thing is we proposed these tenant panels to be routed aluminum backed with translucent acrylic, but we didn't propose them to be pushed through. That adds cost for the tenants, and that also there are limitations to being able to route these little sign faces and have push through acrylic, which is half-inch thick acrylic that actually pushes through the openings for the letters. So anyway, those are the only two things that I noticed in the conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Tarrant. I'll just confirm that Mr. Biagini has nothing to add. Okay, seeing that there doesn't appear to be anything to add, go ahead then and ask if there is any public comment with respect to this item. And Mr. Murdoch, I'll ask that you assist us with that.
Sure, but it looked like Mr. Biagini was speaking but was on mute. I think he may have some remarks.
Okay, well, we'll just go ahead then and hear from Mr. Biagini. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes.
All right. The only comment I have is your packet page 79. I'm looking at South Building, Southwest Elevation Retail. One of the conditions is that the signs will be in a horizontal axis. But if you look closely at packet page 79, you will see that there are 3 grade elevation changes. And I just want to make sure that you understand I'm agreeing to horizontal axis within each grade elevation. And there are 3 separate grade elevations. So we will be on a horizontal axis within each grade elevation.
Thank you for that comment. I guess we'll probably follow up on that. Mr. Murdoch, I think then we'll go ahead and hear from the public if there is any public comment with respect to this item.
Thank you, Chair. I don't see any hands raised at this time.
That being the case, we'll bring the matter back then to the commission, and I'll ask my colleagues. Oh, looks like.
Yes, one hand raised as you were bringing it back to the commission, Chair.
Okay, we'll go ahead then and hear from that individual.
All right, Julie Haas, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Great. So my only question or concern is I had difficulty understanding the illumination that of the signage. It said that it's internally lit. My concern is the volume of light. I don't know how it compares to the existing, but I'm concerned that it might be fairly bright for the homes north of the shopping center.
Thank you, Ms. Haas. So unless there's any other public comment, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the commission.
There are no other hands raised, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. So we'll go ahead then and come back to the commission, and I'll ask my colleagues if there are any comments or questions or discussion at this point. Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you, Chair. I did have some questions for the applicant, and as I'm reviewing them, staff may want to weigh in on these as well. First of all, let me say I really appreciate the facade improvements that the shopping center did. I think it's a huge improvement, and it's nice to see that that signage is being updated. I think it's a really nice place to have in Pacifica to shop. I think the graphics that were presented in the sign program are clear and they make sense. I think that I'm used to seeing sign programs that have more annotation on things like, are neon signs allowed, or moving animation signs allowed, changeable copy signs, like is there going to be wayfinding throughout the center? So I didn't necessarily see anything that, struck me as, off, or where I didn't concur with staff's assessment. I just didn't see as much information as I'm used to. And I'm wondering how that is going to be controlled or contemplated.
Well, Commissioner Hauser, I'm willing to make a first attempt at answering your question. I agree with you that sign programs often have, a long list of prohibited sign types, for example. In my opinion, it's a belt and suspenders approach to have that. Ultimately, the first issue is that the Pacifica Municipal Code has various types of prohibited signs, which would apply regardless of whether they're specifically stated as being prohibited in a master sign program. Secondly, and I think more importantly and more directly, this master sign program has a specific allowable type of sign for the wall signs, for example. And so any sign that's other than that sign type would not be allowed because it would be inconsistent with the master sign program. So for example, you wouldn't see exposed neon because it wouldn't meet the specifications of the sign type.
Okay. That's helpful, Mr. Murdoch. For things like, what about the kind of wayfinding question? And then on that same kind of mind frame, is there a requirement that any sort of painted metal sign would be a certain finish, like factory finish, or are we going to allow painted metal signs? Does that go back to the Muni Code as well?
So as to the wayfinding, there's no requirement for wayfinding signs in the municipal code, and the applicant, to my knowledge, in the sign program hasn't proposed any. Perhaps Ms. Agrawal has had those discussions with the applicant previously. So it potentially could require an amendment to the master sign program in the future if extensive wayfinding signs, for example, were needed. This isn't a particularly large or complex shopping center to navigate, but
sure,
still there could be some benefit for wayfinding signs at some point in the future. And so I think, ultimately the applicant will need to decide if he wants to pursue wayfinding signs at some point in the future. As to the painted metal signs, I think I would need to know more about what you're describing in that regard.
So like a typical metal sign, you hear something like it would be automotive paint grade finished or something like that, where you're not painting it. And then especially in our ocean air, it's like peeling in 90 days. So again, I'm not seeing anything that's necessarily concerning. I'm just not seeing as much information as I'm used to.
Yeah, again, if you're describing, could someone paint a sign and put it up somewhere in the center, the signage would need to be consistent with the master sign program. And so that sign type is not permissible unless you're referring, for example, to the freestanding sign panels and concerned that the specifications are not rigorous enough on the coloring for that.
Okay. And then I just wanted to understand, for the 20-foot sign, most cars are driving between 30 and 40 miles per hour on Oceana. So is that, I understand that there's more square footage allowed. Is that size going to be appropriate or big enough for you, Mr. Biagini, to get for cars to see it as they're driving?
Well, cars on Highway 1 are not going to see this sign. They don't even see the existing sign. So it's really more of a very local submarket sign for people driving up and down Oceana Road Boulevard, and they'll see this sign well enough. And what you're looking at was a product of a lot of discussions with Renew and also Christian. And what we're proposing is acceptable to us, and we think it will serve the public up and down Oceana Boulevard.
Okay. My only other question was on that same monument sign. And again, I don't have it. I didn't open it as the packet. So it's the second page of the actual, or I'm sorry, the third page of the actual sign program. It's call out as page 3. southeast corner of the monument sign looks like it's really close to the curb and to that parking space. And I understand that I can't see any utilities, transformers, landscaping, but I just wanted to make sure that you weren't concerned about somebody backing into it, opening a car door into it, that was spaced appropriately for you.
It's oriented in that planter island such that anybody opening a car door in the nearest stall won't conflict with the sign. And it's back far enough from the concrete curbing that unless an automobile loses control, it won't be hit by cars. I think it'll be fine where it is.
Okay. That addresses my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. Commissioner Hauser took one of my questions. I was also concerned about the sign's proximity to the parking stall. I was assuming that that's something that will likely also be reviewed at the building permit phase. Is that a correct assumption?
So
I'll try to answer that. This new sign is going in the exact same spot that the current sign is. It's not being moved any which way. It's just going to be shorter and not as wide.
And Vice Chair Berman, as it relates to building code standards, I'm unaware if there's a standard where that would be verified in the plan check. And so I don't want to commit to that. Mm-hmm. What I will say was a priority for the city's review is making sure the sign would not present a threat to public health and safety from vehicle sight distance. And so that has been evaluated and will be double checked during the building permit review process by the city's engineering division if this master sign program is approved.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not aware of the building code requirement either. I think it's just common for best practice if you're putting a parking stall next to like a wall, usually you add an extra foot or two. But yeah, so that's fine. That addresses my question so long as staff doesn't have any concerns. Then I also wanted to touch on the public comment that we received. My take from the staff report was that there was a photometric analysis, or rather consideration to the nearby neighbors on the luminosity of the signs. Mr. Murdoch, do you mind touching on staff's review of just impacts from light to the nearby neighborhood?
Sure, I'll make an observation first and then allow Ms. Agarwal to speak more specifically to her work on that point. I think it's important to compare the prior sign design to the current sign design as a preliminary matter. You know, comparing illumination is difficult, and I don't think we can descriptively do that necessarily where we sit today. But if you think back to what the signs were before, they were large cabinets with acrylic faces and had a very large illuminated surface area, and primarily had a white background, which really provided a lot of brightness and visual, I think, illumination. This sign design for the wall signs has channel letters and much smaller illuminated surface. And then the freestanding signs similarly will have relatively small illuminated surface area by comparison to some of the large panels that were in the current sign design. And so I think those two qualitative factors will likely help diminish or at least not result in an obtrusive amount of illumination. And Ms. Agarwal might have some points to add.
So we also looked at the color temperature value, which determines the glare. And research indicates that anything up to 6,500 K does not cause glare.
Thank you. I had a feeling that, well, my read of the staff report, I felt pretty confident that there wouldn't be a negative impact on the neighborhood. But thank you. I was looking for a more professional analysis. Thank you. Another comment or question rather that I have, and this understandably isn't going to apply to this project, but I'm wondering if the city has considered trying to, what's the word? maybe suggest to applicants solar panel use for energizing signs. Again, I understand it's not going to apply to this project, but it's something that I thought of that I don't know if the city has considered.
I'm not aware specifically that we've considered that related to signage. I will say that since these prior signs were installed, and certainly the freestanding sign, for example, the California Energy Code has advanced significantly, and it's quite common to have to provide energy calculations when obtaining a building permit for new construction such as this. And so all I can offer you is that I would imagine the level of efficiency to the LEDs, for example, probably will result in much more efficient energy usage for the illumination in these signs.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Berman. Commissioner Godwin.
Yeah, I've had a little background in light physics, and basically the 6,500 Kelvin is roughly the equivalent of the light on a cloudy day, somewhat overcast. So it should not really be that bright for anybody to be that concerned about. I just wanted to throw that comment in.
Thank you, Commissioner Godwin. Any other questions or comments, observations? All right, well, perhaps we've reached the, actually, I did have one additional thing I just wanted to validate or confirm with staff. There's a comment that Mr. Biagini made regarding the, I guess on page 79 he was referencing, and maybe this is already covered and I just missed it, but the elevations and sort of the signage being on a horizontal axis. And I think he was indicating that there would be 3 grade elevation changes, and he just wanted to confirm that we'd have things on a horizontal, I guess it was a horizontal axis within each grade elevation. I wanted to confirm that, staff's understanding was consistent with that.
Yes, Chair, thank you. And it certainly was staff's intent to result in the outcome that Mr. Biagini identified, where the signs were aligned horizontally in the building facades of comparable elevation, not to have them on an absolute horizontal axis. And so if there's some concern on the applicant's part, staff would be amenable to revising that condition of approval to provide some greater clarity as to what the intent is and an allowance for a different horizontal axis per segment of facade that has a different elevation, if the commission was interested in hearing that language.
It seems clear enough to me. I certainly wanted to make sure that we were all kind of reading the same one. All right. Okay. Are there any other questions, or at this point is a commissioner inclined to make any motion regarding this matter? Commissioner Berman.
I just remembered, I think there was one more comment from the applicant regarding Oceana Market sign and that maintaining their standard text font. Is that?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Do we need to, is that something that both staff and the applicant agree to? And is that something that we would want to work into the conditions?
Thank you, Commissioner Berman. And I think there was also a reference to, I don't know, sort of push through, and this is a little bit beyond my technical understanding, but push through acrylic for signs. And I think there was some concern about that was raised as well, now that you mention it. Mr. Murdoch, could you address those 2 points?
Yes, Chair. So with respect to the font, I think, staff would have the opinion that the fewer different types of fonts, the more consistent the appearance of the sign and probably the greater visual integrity of it. However, a deviation for one panel probably would not result in a loss of the integrity of the sign. And so I think we just want some specificity as to what that font would be. And we could do that post-approval if the commission approves the master sign program, and then limit that sign for Oceana Market, for example, or at least the anchor tenant panel to be more generic to a particular font so that there's not a deviation at some point in the future to accommodate the desires of that particular tenant. And as for the push through, I heard 2 reasons from the applicant's sign specialist. One was cost and one was potential feasibility concerns. It wasn't clear to me that it was potentially infeasible to construct the signs in that fashion. I think it's staff's opinion that it would result in a higher quality appearance to the signs to have that depth from the push through letters. But ultimately, I think the commission might want to explore that with the applicant and his team to see if there's more to that particular issue.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. I would be interested in knowing sort of how, what are the feasibility issues, and then what is the actual incremental cost difference, so that we have a basis for weighing the pros and the cons of it. Is that something Mr. Biagini or anyone else can speak to?
I'm going to let Mr. Tarrant, our sign vendor, reply, because this is a matter more technical that he would be able to answer better than I can. Go ahead, Mike.
You got it. And while we're at it, you guys were asking about the parking next to the planter where the sign's going to be located. I'm on Google Earth right now, and there is a yellow area. So my artist doesn't show that on my site plan in the master sign plan. You can't park adjacent to that curb. So there's basically that first parking space doesn't exist. So sorry about that. As far as push through goes, as far as cost, I couldn't say offhand the increase, but I would say in maybe even $500 per two panels per tenant. They might be the additional cost for push through. The push through is actually, it's a 1/2 inch thick acrylic that is cut out in the shape of those letters, and it actually slips through the letters that are routed into that metal background so that they stick through kind of like a 3-dimensional letter. And the difficulty occurs when you get smaller lettering. I mean, we're limited to certain space on those small tenant panels. So until you have what each tenant wants to say, you don't really know for sure that it's infeasible, but it could create problems. So I just wanted to bring those two up. I mean, we can make it work if that's what it's got to be.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've heard from Mr. Tarrant on that, and Commissioner Hauser.
I mean, I was just going to say that I think it's important to have the flexibility with the anchor tenants to have the different font. I think that is something that I would be in support of. I also concur with staff that the push through looks better, but not entirely one way or the other.
Thank you. I would say that I'd ordinarily like to have some flexibility and potentially some cost savings. On the other hand, it doesn't strike me. I don't want to sort of minimize the $500 is not nothing by any stretch. On the other hand, given the improved aesthetics, I think I'd probably be leaning more in favor of sort of what staff is recommending in this particular case. But I'm certainly willing to and interested in other views. Commissioner Berman.
I'm inclined to be a little more supportive of allowing the flexibility for the anchor tenants. And in my opinion, just to the discretion of the planning director's review and approval on font size. But I'm willing to hear staff's overall recommendation or other commissioners.
Thank you. I think from our perspective, again, having a unified font for all of the tenant panels on the freestanding sign would result in the most aesthetically appealing and integral appearance to the freestanding sign. It's not clear to me if the commission was considering allowing up to one panel or panels for all anchor tenants to have different fonts. While today, I think there may only be the one anchor tenant with Oceana Market. Who knows what the future could hold in terms of consolidation of lease spaces. And if you were to allow all anchor tenants, for example, to have different fonts, you could lose the integrity and the aesthetics to the sign. And so I think if the commission wants to provide that flexibility, It could be limited to one anchor tenant panel, or just setting all of the panels to the font that Oceana Market would like in this particular instance, so that they're unified and integral to one another.
Commissioner Berman, did you have further comment?
Yeah, I realized I should probably clarify. I was more thinking on Oceana Market's building structure versus on the freestanding sign. I guess they could be one and the same, or they could be looked at differently. I'm not gonna, what's the phrase? Die on this mound, die on this hill. But I think it's good that we're talking about it.
I just wanted to clarify. I believe the applicant's request was specific to Oceana Market. It wasn't. I don't believe it was for all anchor tenants. If I'm not misrecalling. So it'd be my view that if we were going to deviate at all from kind of where we are with respect to that specific anchor tenant.
And I guess I just need to admit that I thought that the comment was specific to the freestanding sign, but if it was broader than that, I wasn't aware of that request.
Commissioner Hauser.
You know, I think with what Mr. Murdoch just said, we may need some clarification from the applicant if it pleases the chair, but I would be supportive of just doing it for Oceana Market if that's where everyone's leaning, which is kind of what it sounds like.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. I think your suggestion is a good one. We'll turn to the applicant in a second, but I want to hear from Commissioner Godwin first.
Yeah, I like the idea where you let the anchor tenant select a font and then apply it to all the signs. I think that's the one that I think would most be aesthetically pleasing to me.
Thank you, Commissioner Godwin. Wanted to circle back then to Mr. Tarrant, I guess, or Mr. Biaggi, whoever wanted to speak to this. Biagini, I'm sorry. Just to clarify what specifically you were looking for with respect to to this matter.
I'll try to respond to that. With respect to the monument sign, we're looking for what you see, the logo and Oceana Market in a smaller font. The other 6 tenants are all small independent tenants, and they would have the font size that you see on the plan. As far as the building itself is concerned, Oceana Market would have a 36-inch high letter on the building facade, and then 2 smaller signs on either side. Those would each be 18 inches. And what font he uses, we would let him decide, assuming that it's consistent with your municipal code.
And Chair Niblin, I want to clarify, the proposed master sign program would already allow that to happen for the wall signs. If you look at packet page 72, there's general sign information, which basically are general sign standards. And number 3 indicates that flexibility for all of the tenants actually in the shopping center to have a font type and color acceptable to the landlord and to the city. And so we're not seeking to prescribe the font type for all of those wall signs, but when they're collected in aggregate in such a small area on the freestanding sign, that's where we've sought through the conditions of approval to achieve greater unity for the font style.
Thank you. Commissioner Berman.
That clarification addresses my concerns. So I then am supportive of the staff report as it's written.
And Chair Niblin, if I could provide a further clarification, I think there's a lot of discussion about the font types, but I think getting mixed into that is size of the text and so on. We haven't sought to prescribe a letter size on the freestanding sign. We have some other criteria in terms of the amount of the panel surface that can be comprised of signage to ensure there's a margin to achieve an appropriate aesthetic balance, and limited the copy to two lines of copy. But otherwise, we had just simply sought to have all of the font styles themselves match what's shown for the Eureka Square Shopping Center panel. So I think if the commission wanted to allow flexibility for the anchor tenant panel, in this case, Oceana Market, to have a different font style, we would need to make that revision to the conditions of approval. But if you were just concerned about flexibility in the size of the text, that's already flexible in staff's opinion.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let me poll my colleagues. And is there an interest in affording flexibility with respect to font style as to the anchor tenant? Because that again would require a tweak to the conditions as we have them in front of us. Maybe I'll ask Commissioner Damerat. Why don't you start?
I think some flexibility would be okay. I'd be concerned that if a font style, let's say a script style, was picked that is not legible and not easily readable from the street as people are driving by, would be a concern. But maybe there's something we can agree to that would be a choice of 2 or 3 kind of styles to give some consistency, but yet give a little bit of flexibility.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Godwin, your thoughts on the map?
My belief, as I said, is I'm happy with what the anchor tenant selects. It would be good if everybody else adopted the same font style.
Well, what would be your view if they were different, though? If they would you be supportive of allowing the anchor tenant flexibility with respect to font style if the other tenants did not track that font style?
I could live with it. I think sign will look a little less effective.
Thank you. Commissioner Berman.
No comments or questions right now.
Thank you. Do you have a view with respect to allowing flexibility to the with respect to font style for the anchor tenant?
Yeah. I mean, since Mr. Murdoch clarified the item that I was concerned with, which is flexibility for the wall sign on the building. I'm kind of flexible for either option of the freestanding sign. I like how it is visually laid out in the staff report, which is pretty consistent.
Yes.
Granted, the Oceana Market sign is a different font there, which I think it still looks nice. I think it would look nice if they were all the same font as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hauser, do you have a view?
Yeah, I concur with Commissioner Berman. And maybe I'm misunderstanding the discussion about letting Oceana Market choose everybody else's font on the freestanding sign. But that would not be my preference. I think I don't know if that would be appropriate. I don't know, but I think so. I'm just going to echo Commissioner Berman.
Okay, yeah, I don't think that was the request. I don't think the request from the applicant was to allow the anchor tenant to pick the font size. I think it was to allow a difference in font style. So I meant to say font style as between the anchor tenant and the other tenants.
Yeah, and I'm supportive of that concept. And I agree with Commissioner Berman that what's shown in the staff report and in the master sign program graphic is aesthetically appealing.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Damerat, I see your hand still up. Did you have additional? Thank you. Well, I think we've worked our way through this fairly exhaustively and I think productively as well. I wonder if there might be a motion that somebody is inclined to make at this point. Commissioner Hauser.
I'll make it, but someone's going to have to help me a lot.
We're all here. It's a team.
So, Mr. Murdoch, what did we make changes to the conditions that staff recommended, or?
Well, I am aware of 2 potential changes that may have been floated. One at the request of, I guess both at the request of the applicant, but one subject to more discussion than the other. The first would be to revise condition 2.A.2, which is on packet page 64, 2.A.2. And that would be to provide some clarity as to the horizontal axis requirements for the wall signs, just to avoid some unintended consequence that they are, installed on one common axis inadvertently. That language would be something along the lines of the anchor tenant and small tenant signs shall be center aligned with each other along a horizontal axis for each segment of the building facade at the same elevation level to account for elevation differences throughout the shopping center and shall be installed in the general locations as shown on the elevations. And then the other potential revision that had been discussed would involve condition 2.B.4.D, which is on packet page 65. It's under the freestanding monument sign heading. So if you find that freestanding monument sign, page 9, it's on packet page 65. Bullet D, that's the one addressing the font and letter styles on the freestanding sign. In order to allow flexibility for one anchor tenant panel, the commission could change that condition to read as follows. The font and letter height of the Eureka Square Shopping Center identification top panel shall be as shown on the new monument sign elevation, page 9. All tenant panels shall utilize the same font, except that one anchor tenant panel may deviate from the font style required herein.
All right. I am amenable to both of those wordings. So let me try here. So I move that the Planning Commission find the project exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and approve sign permit S-133-20 and sign exception SE-31-22 by adopting the attached resolution, including conditions of approval as amended per what Mr. Murdoch just read in Exhibit A, and incorporates all maps and testimony into the record by reference.
Thank you for that motion. And thank you, Mr. Murdoch, for the assistance in stitching it together. Commissioner Berman.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have the motion from Commissioner Hauser, seconded by Commissioner Berman. Could we get a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Berman.
Yes.
Commissioner Domerat.
Yes.
Commissioner Godwin.
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser.
Yes.
Commissioner Niblin.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I'd note that anybody who's aggrieved of the action of the Planning Commission has 10 calendar days to appeal the decision in writing to the City Council. If any of the above action, if this action is challenged in court, issues which may be raised are limited to those raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Thank you. We will then move to communications, and the communications, we'll start with commission communications. Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that we've been getting a lot of feedback from the public, both through email correspondence and at these meetings on different things that are going on in the city. And I just wanted to just say on the record that, we read all of the emails and we really appreciate the outreach. We don't always respond, but we are listening and we appreciate all the work that's being done.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. I don't see any other commission communications, so I will move to staff communications. I'll ask Mr. Murdoch to share any staff communication.
Thank you, Chair Niblin. I just want to indicate that the City Council has extended the public review and comment period on the Plan Pacifica Draft Environmental Impact Report, or DEIR, through 5 p.m. on March 8th. For those who may not know, the Plan Pacifica process involves a comprehensive update to the city's general plan and a new Shark Park specific plan. And the draft EIR would evaluate the environmental impacts associated with both of those plans. The city encourages public involvement in this process and in review and comment on these documents. And so anybody that's interested can visit planpacifica.org to learn more information, to see the draft documents and the draft EIR, and to learn more about the process overall.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Well, we've been through communications, and the next item on the agenda is to adjourn. So I'll ask if there is a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Berman.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. We have a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Hauser.
I'll second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Berman,
Yes.
Commissioner Domerat,
Yes.
Commissioner Godwin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser,
Yes.
Commissioner Niblin.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Well, we're adjourned for the evening. I want to thank everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Okay.